that. And so I think now they know that they've got some good stuff happening, and they're just trying to settle in. They're trying to get, hey, do we need to have, 2 coaches? Do we need to co-op share anymore? Do we need to not? So that type of stuff, a lot of those kind of more fine-tuning questions. Last year, it was just like, hey, I've got some people interested. Tell me how to do this. So so we're fine-tuning now, which is great.
Do you think that we're over that hurdle of coaches feeling like the uneasiness of like starting a girls program, or is it still like a foreign thing of like, I don't know where the hell to start?
Yeah, I think it just depends on where they are, right? In terms of more of our rural schools, who they're scrapping more participation together and things like that. They're really they've got to work really, really hard at putting together a schedule and being thoughtful about transportation and things like that. So they may have a few more challenges about exactly how to do right by their program than maybe somebody in central Iowa or eastern Iowa, where we've got some more established programs and we just have more numbers there. So the hurdles, I think it's nice to be able to, and this is where I always lean on my advisory committee too, because we've got, makeup of big school, small school type stuff where they're well versed now when I'm sending people to them of like, hey, we've got a similar size school. They might be in your area. Can you kind of walk them through how to do some of your programming and what has worked and not worked? And so being able to push them to people and say, this is, people have really stepped up and helped allow schools out that way. And that's gone well. So just having more resources to send people to.
Yeah, I talking with, I'm from Earlham now. I moved to Earlham and had
WCAC. Yeah.
had one girl, that the town followed, and that's got to be. I haven't talked to her or her father just about how that could be kind of hard, as far as like being the only girl. But I mean, I think to represent your school and being the only one, like talk about having the opportunity to be like an ambassador,
I mean, a trailblazer.
A trailblazer, right? For the community.
Absolutely.
Her names are on our wall in our wrestling room, so like you don't. Those opportunities are already have been had in a lot of these communities. So I think if you are a program out there that are thinking about doing it, is from what I am seeing is you just what everyone thought was going to happen was if you build it, they will come. Mm-hmm. And you can see communities like, okay, Bettendorf, right? Ella Smith, she was wrestling with the boys, and now I just saw a poster of them, and they have like 25 girls out. So how many of those girls are first-year wrestlers, right? So I think it's just from the feeling is rip the Band-Aid off and just kind of go in and watch the magic happen, because there hasn't been, and I'm sure on your end, have been maybe some bad cases or things that didn't go that they thought they were going to go, or some issues, and we have that in the boys, right? But I would say 98% of the things are probably positive.
Overwhelmingly. And that was, I think we kind of touched on that a little bit before, but I have just said, from the get-go, and what we have seen in a lot of our sports is just like girls will show up. They will surprise you in the best of ways, right? If they're walking through those doors, their biggest obstacle isn't going to be whether or not they're going to stay out. It's whether or not they're going to go out. And I think once they commit to going out, they're in. And so, and then they're bringing their friends, right? Because they're like, hey, and their friends are looking and they're saying, well, if she can do it, like I can do it, it's, so that's where we saw a lot, even more growth, and where we were even pleasantly surprised, where, last year it was like, people are like, oh, they're all going to drop off before Christmas, or you're only going to see half. And it's like, no, they were sticking around. I'd go into track wrestling every week and my numbers are climbing, more girls are getting certified. So that to me was a really good sign that we were moving in the right direction for sure. And I got chills every single time I walked into any sort of, big arena, but then also small gym, because of what these girls are willing to do. And then the people who've worked so hard to put together their scheduling, their transportation, just their support, everything they need. And the energy in all of those spaces last year was unreal. you talk to the coaches, you talk to those people, and they're like, yeah, this felt magical. So I'm hoping that continues this year too.
I mean, there are some challenges when you pull back, like, those moments that you get to witness, from a probably administration standpoint of like, how the heck do we do this? And I think from what I've heard is the administrators and the programs that are growing, like, they're just, let's just do it, figure it out, not worry about budgets and stuff like
Yeah.
that. I mean, because we've got some programs like Earlham where we have one coach, a head coach and some assistant coaches. We don't have an assistant girls wrestling coach, so there's programs that they're double dipping, right? So the time commitment that it takes for that coach to do two, I think is something that has to be talked about within your program, within the community of, hey, this is already here.
Right.
Like, we have to start figuring out how we can get those ADs on board to put those fundings into, because if you have a coach, I mean, you have to alleviate some of those problems from the boys coach, right? So Winterset, close school by us, they just hired a head girls coach. So like, now that community is excited because they have someone else that they can rely on that might not be distracted from the boys program. What I think is realistic, right? I mean, I think it's hard to expect a head coach to have to do both because they are two different animals, I would say. Is that fair?
I mean, logistically, this is what I've, when I've talked to ADs and kind of counseled them through some of this stuff where they're like, well, cross country, we only have one girl and we, they practice together. And I said, yeah, and you're going to the same place. Like, basically every cross country meets at the same place. Basically every, bowling event you have is at the same place. Basically, I mean, all of these things. So you can coach both. A lot of golf events are at the same place, right? Wrestling, your events and boys, going one way. So what a lot of programs, the feedback that we've got were a lot of programs that tried to do that, then they felt like they were shortchanging one program or another in terms of, well, I lined it all up and, took my girls here on Monday, but then realized I had to really shortcut my practice and with my boys or this or that. So I think when a lot of people looked at that as a way to patch it together, if you don't have the assistance and the structure to support that with other adults, then I think that gets really hard and really stressful on both programs when you try to do it. So so this is, I'm telling Chris Caskey at Earlham, just get a girls coach. I mean, it's just, but you legitimize it that way, right? Like you said that how people are excited about that in Winterset. Well, Winterset just stepped up and said, we're we didn't do this last year, but we are going to be thoughtful and we're going to legitimize it and we're going to put somebody in charge of that that can take these girls to the next level and really give them a good experience. And that's what I think is so important.
And for that, talking about that community, because I do know a little bit about how it got handled, is the club. I've heard, and I guess I don't want to assume things, but I heard that, the club, the kids club, right, that we have all over the state of Iowa, which is the foundation of how we have so many kids out for wrestling, is they self-funded that type of deal. They said, hey, we'll give you $2,500. It's not coaches don't coach for the money, right? But a little bit of money can go find you a coach, right? So with that said, with some of the challenges that are still out there, I guess from an administration standpoint, is do you feel like that the numbers are growing? How do you compare last year's numbers to this year's numbers, because it was record growth compared to other states?
Correct. Yeah, we Iowa had the most growth of any state in our country, right? Which was phenomenal. I mean, I felt that, right? But it's so hard when you're so focused on what you're doing in your own state, and then to take a step back. And then it was the NWCA, and I think they partnered with Wrestle Like a Girl, and they all put together these really big, kind of this big data series where then they released it to all of the states that essentially participated in it, of like who's got the most growth, what the numbers look like, how they did things, and it was really awesome. They sent out a bunch of infographic material that showed that Iowa. I was really, really proud of it, right? What I was doing, and that a lot of that came out, in a time where I was really evaluating, like, what are we going to do with this next year, and were we on the right track? And it's so hard to kind of beat yourself up about like the really little details of some of these things. And then when you are able to take a step back and look at the data and like, wow, that like, and then you get people calling and how did you do that? And what does this look like? And you know, again, I say we're in such a different, we're in such a different world than a lot of states because we are the only state that has a separate girls and boys, you know,
Yeah.
governing body. But this is where, you know, when people say, why do you do that? Or why is, you know, it's maybe frustrating for some people to understand. And it's like, this is the case of why we exist, because when we roll something out or when we put our stamp on something, we can fund it, we can give it all the attention and the energy that it deserves, and we can just blow it out of the water. So we've got, you know, people like, hey, how can I get tickets to your event next year? We want to come. We want to see how you do this. And
Yeah.
so that's a, I mean, that was a huge compliment to, I think, you know, the way we are already structured to be able to, I guess, govern and build this type of program and a season long, right? We talked about that earlier too, of how I think Iowa got a bad rap about not sanctioning things early enough. I've seen a lot of states struggle to try to put together some things, and I'm like, well, how many girls do you have out? And they're like 50, and it's like, ooh, that's hard. You know what I mean? And so it's just trying to help states kind of figure out how to fuel some of that initial startup, right? Where ours grew really quickly, which was really nice to be able to work with. You know, but other states are just, they're in such a different space than what we are. We have found for boys and girls what Iowa does for athletics for high school kids is so rare compared to what other states are willing to do in terms of how they fund it, what they're willing to do to back it. I mean, like our state track meet, all of these things, like we run the best state track meet in the country. And like very few people know that until they're able to take a step back and look at that from like a national scale. So getting all of that, the feedback on that national level was really, really helpful for us to know like our needle's pointing in the right direction, and we're sitting pretty good.
I got him. I mean, obviously for you of who is have a wrestling background, know a little about the sport,
Yeah.
right? That you're going into it having a kind of an idea of how the boys do it, but you didn't get to go to a California state championship
Yeah.
or Illinois or whatever it may be and see how they ran their state championships. You were at the boys state
Yeah.
championships and kind of figured out things you could do, and the boys, from my understanding, were receptive of showing you kind
Oh
of
yeah.
what they want to
Louis
do.
great.
Obviously, Louis
Great.
wanted to
Yeah.
do everything he could to make this happen. And looking back at like how much pressure there was to make this happen, and I do remember you saying, "Okay, guys, like we really want to do this the right way."
Yeah.
And it's I'm guessing all these other states that are like feeling that pressure, they didn't really step back and be like, we should do that too. They're just like,
Yeah.
they kind of felt pressure just to have to do it,
Right.
which I also understand
Yeah.
and respect other states for saying, all right, we're going to do it, because everyone's saying just build it and we'll figure it out. You guys did take a little bit more time, but it was fast moving in reality
Yeah.
of like, hey, okay, we got to take a look at this.
Yeah, I think once, again, once those participation numbers were up and once we were, I really credit the IWCOA for putting together some postseason stuff as far as their postseason state tournament, so that we could actually say that like this, they created this tangible thing then that we could see and we could really like go and experience. And that was just, so knowing that those things like that existed already, and I could go in and watch and see how they did that a little bit, and talk to all of those the stakeholders, the people that have been so invested in it for a long time. Then for me, it was just like, okay, let's go. It was, again, the numbers were there, and that's where I think that we were really fortunate to just, okay, now we just gotta, you gotta
fine tune it.
Yeah, and then just lasso it and go, right. So, but also if you look at the way, and this is where it was maybe a little bit harder for the wrestling world, because when you have such wrestling specific people, they're not paying attention to what we were doing at girls state basketball, right? Our championships, right?
Yeah.
They maybe heard the buzz of, going to the well and that kind of stuff. Or how we're doing state volleyball, or how we're doing these things, especially in the last 5 years, how we've done a lot of our tournaments. And just all of the pomp and circumstance that's put with having an actually a great tournament, right? Um, so I was just really excited because it was like, going to our staff goes to all of our state tournaments and we help each other out. So there's a great comfort in knowing that I work with a bunch of rock stars who we're just never going to let each other fail, right? So then what we can do at state softball, and like in my head, I know that we can do a lot of these things then at wrestling, right? And having these things and then coming off of, I felt like a lot of pressure having a great lead in and really being sandwiched between state volleyball and state basketball, which are two of our biggest tournaments, right? And where we have great fan turnout and they're just the atmosphere of that. I was like, okay, I can't let it go from volleyball to wrestling back to basketball, right? I've got to keep that energy up here. And so the people in our office, they knew what their jobs were when it came to putting together the rest of it. They were like, Erin, you worry about the wrestling component of it, tournament aspect of it, and working with our people over there. I call them our people, but it's the Iowa City Sports Commission and Think Iowa City and all of those people over there who are already just wrestling hungry, and loving to put on events, loving their partnership with us. I was so excited to just get to that point, but just making sure we didn't have too many missteps between when we started and when we got there.
Yep.
So that's where Super Regionals got. That was the craziest thing for me. I knew our state tournament would be good, but Super Regionals, I was like, "Ooh, this is a big hanging question mark, right?"
Yeah, I mean, you guys had 4 different massive venues, which I'll get to here in a little bit, but I want to go just to close the book on just kind of the success. When you're, and I don't know who was pushing it, I guess, within the organization, because you got there, and then you were the person that was charged with wrestling, I guess. So like, I'm not sure if there was anybody that was saying, hey, I don't know if we should do this, but like you get those infographics, I'm just picturing Erin with this big graphic and just going, boom, what's up? Pop champagne, is it like that? Or is it like, all right, get back to work?
Yeah, no, it was like, okay, I'm also the tennis administrator. So it was like, okay, now how do I make tennis even more awesome? You know what I mean? It's just kind of that, like that kind of that contagious feeling from sport to sport. But no, we always get like this too when we get done with, we're wrapping up a season, but we're literally sitting there at the state tournament. I watched very little wrestling at the state tournament. It's just like when you're running the tournament, you're running around with your head cut off. But I was just like, man, I wish I could do this again next week because I could make it 10 times better with just these little details, like doors opening a half hour sooner and, like just the, checkpoints at here and here, and we don't need this here. You know what I mean? Just these little details within the arena that I'm like, man, that, so you get excited and you're processing that with the rest of your staff who's also excited about it. And, but we do that at every tournament of like making notes, and then we do a full on recap and all this and that. So, like I got to put like a little pin in it of like, okay, we left off there and it was really good, but it's for all of our sports, even the ones we've been doing for 100 years that have been awesome. We're always just like, okay, what's the next level? What's the detail we missed? What do we need to do better? So, yeah,
those are the things that no one sees though, right? And that's what overall picture as a fan. You come in and they don't understand what it takes to make an event like that happen. You guys obviously do, so you're going around crazy. And a simple thing of like the first session when everyone's like, how the heck do we get in the door? Certain one fan posted on Facebook and it kind of blows up a little bit, even though from what we understand is it wasn't really as bad as it was.
Yeah, no, there was, I think that what we found out from the arena that there was actually just 12 people that didn't get entry, at that point for that first session. So we've already taken steps to, okay, we're going to increase seating. And we had this figured out that first day of like, okay, for next year, for tomorrow, what are we going to do differently? We're going to increase the seating. We're going to go to, ticketed sessions. We're going to move it back. I think our start time is going to be an hour later, really, and opening the doors a little sooner too, have ticketed seating, reserved seating so that people can, the traffic flow and that exit coming into Coralville right there, right by the arena has been under construction for a hot minute. And so But you also had all of the hospital traffic that was in there right at that time, people going to work. So it's like, okay, we created just a little bit of a perfect storm.
So it's Thursday, Friday.
Yeah.
Thursday, Friday tournament.
Right, right.
Yes.
So then you go back to, okay, if we push this back an hour later, we miss some of this traffic, we divert, we make this exit, but the great part of it is that we get to test this out at volleyball because it's in the same space 2 months earlier. So, we're working with some parking and some traffic things there that I think are going to make that way easier coming in. And yeah,
so what was the thing? I mean, I brought up like really like the one negative that people I think were talking about was right at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I think it was great, but like what do you think was your favorite moment? And you can only pick one of like, you look back as like, you maybe get a little emotional about it. You're like, wow, that was pretty cool. Maybe not in a specific match, just like what you guys were able to do, I guess.
I feel like I processed so little of it, and I had so many people. Dorothy Mayab, who's she's fantastic, but she was announcing for us, and she pulled me aside. I think she like made me physically sit, and she's like, "I need you to take this in. I need you to take this in." And I'm like, I'm like, Dorothy, I can't. We were going right into finals and things like that. So I remember that moment of being like, I should feel more right now, but you know what I mean? And that my brain's just wired whack. So, but really when we were, finished with the podium and we're taking stuff down and we're in this moment where we're transitioning because boys had duels, the next day. And so they're rapid fire coming in, you know what I mean? It's just like this whole thing of like, we're not really going to breathe, right?
Yeah.
We're just still going. And Jean came up to me, our executive director, and, and she gave me a half hug and she's just like, this is your baby. You did it, and I was just like, whew, I remember just feeling super relieved at that point. And I think I had some tears, and then I see Louis runs over. I think he physically picks me up and like spins me around. I mean, there's like nobody even in there anymore, and he's just like, you did it, kiddo. And I was like, oh my gosh. Right. Like, I'm so happy. And it was just, and then, we went out afterwards and we saw a lot of the officials out, and that was really, really nice because I was actually probably the space that I was most worried about last year, was our officials. We have, we just don't have enough to begin with. And then having to share them, and then really I felt like I had to sell the girl side of it a lot to them on the front end. Our officials coordinator, Bruce Ennen, is a phenomenal human, a great official. And so he's the one who coordinates and is our rule interpreter and things like that. He did a ton of work on the front end to really, I had to sell it to him, right? He was really excited about girls wrestling, but just didn't really know why I thought he was the fit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so then after kind of aligning our personal mission vision for it, he was like, okay, I'm in. And then him getting other people into it and me pulling more people in and like kind of creating a board and a structure, right? We had to create a structure for everything and a board for everything and a committee for everything. But so after we were really able to get that established, and it took like 1 or 2 weeks, right? But we rolled out a whole evaluation system for our officials, that they don't have, they haven't used on the boys' end, and just because we needed a process, right? I'm a process person, so I was like, we have to have a process for everything.
Evaluation of how they get to
how
like
they get
the
to
finals,
state, how they get to postseason, right?
Okay.
And so it was. I was asking a ton of officials right out the gate, and they were like, "Well, we don't have to wear pink shoes, do we?" And I was like, and it was like, I probably,
you should.
I probably got 10 questions from officials going into postseason of like, but can we wear pink shoes? I was like, see, like, I like the flip of the narrative there. So once they got in, and they had a great experience too, because I think they were able to see themselves maybe in a little bit more of a relaxed atmosphere, where they were able to jump in, really get back to a lot of the things that they love about officiating. They said, we weren't hearing a lot of chirping from coaches or fans. Like, people were really just excited to be there. And so I think when they embraced that they were just a big part of this exciting moment, they said, oh gosh, girls hugging me after their matches. And, they were really, it was emotional for them too. So seeing them after the state tournament, because some of them were working the boys event the next day, and they were like, you sold us. Like, we're hooked. We would do this again in a heartbeat. Sign us up for next year, you know? And I said, well, got to get evaluated.
Yeah.
So,
Nice.
you know what I mean?
Well, I really like that because anyone that has watched my show here is I haven't been hard on the whole officiating thing. I've been I was really hard on officials for a while, but that's just the wrestling coach and the wrestler in me. But the process of how you get to be on a tournament or a duel or the state tournament,
Yeah.
you know, it's been kind of like, hey, it's about who you kind of know. There's no really from I've never gone through the process, so but you know, if you're a new official getting into this game, it's very hard to get big events. And from the side of the officials that have been to the state tournament for 15, 20 years, you know, they had to grind at $50 and, you know, an event to get that opportunity, where now in today's world, you know, get your officials license, you're like, hey, I should be doing the state wrestling tournament.
Yeah.
That's not reality, but that's how I think
well,
we have to kind of maybe think about, like, man, I won't throw any names out there, but hey, you know, he's going to be probably done in like 5 years.
Yeah,
And who the hell are we going to get? Mm-hmm. So there has to be some kind of process of a mentorship, which Bruce Ennin, which is smart from your end of getting him involved, because he has been an advocate of, you know, putting a guy like Aaron Daniels. I'm not sure if you know that name, but I went to college with him. You know, he was at the girls' tournament, and you know, getting, I guess, the second official kind of helping him through some processes and evaluating him, I guess. So I really like that. No one really saw that, but I think for the future growth of us not having this issue of having to share officials, which I think is good, but like not having to have that worry of who the hell are we going to get to officiate our duel or tournament, like state tournament or super regionals. That's just something that we shouldn't have to worry about. I don't know what that gap is there, but I think it is letting these younger officials get that opportunity. I think is super important.
Again, needing to have a process, right? You have to have a process to see where you are. You have to, I'm somebody who, good or bad, I value a lot of feedback. I need that. And so I understand how important that is to me. So I would expect that it's important to whatever, half the other people I know.
Yeah.
So I think my biggest thing was I didn't want to turn away people who were really working hard all season, and then, you know, when it came up short, because also I can't speak to things like Louis can, right? Mm-hmm. Or like, you know, I'm not, we don't have that position in our office. Our office is just structured different. We don't have an administrator over officials in our office. We have these assigned coordinators over each of the sports, right? So for me, it was like, well, you have to go through Bruce to get to assign to postseason. So then in working with Bruce, I was like, them knowing me isn't going to get anything. Like, are they going to bring me chocolate? Like, what? I mean, like, I can't speak to how they're doing, right? So I think at the end of the day, we had to come up with a process, and Bruce felt really, really good about that too, of, you know, using his board then to create what they wanted, and then kind of go from there. But when we're trying to compile all this information across the state, you have to have a streamlined system that's effective and works. And then you can, you know, when somebody doesn't get in the door, you can turn around and say, hey, this is why, like, this is where you kind of ranked, and this is what it was, and this is what, you know, the good and the bad. So all of those officials who were evaluated, which all of them that were in postseason were evaluated at least once or twice, if not multiple times. You know, they knew where they were sitting, right? But then you also, that was just one touch point, and then you had to have coaches coaches recommendations, and you had to have, you know, I mean, like, all of these different things. And so then essentially then you were assigned a score based on some of those things. So they were really, really thoughtful on how they did that. I think the people who maybe didn't make it, you know, into that space right away, have a lot of good things to work on, and we're really appreciative of it. I think we had like one disgruntled person who was going to be disgruntled no matter what. So that was fine. But then again, us having those super regional events, they were like mini state tournaments, right? And so when I'm, you know, we're bringing in like 30 people at each of those super regionals, it's like, yeah, let's go. You know, let's see I think it was a really great trial run for our officials, for our coaches, and for our athletes, of like what the state tournament was going to look like that next week, and gave people a really good idea of like, yeah, just turning it up a notch. as opposed to just being in a gym, right?
Mhm.
Where things just feel maybe a little bit more like regular season.
Um, do you think that I don't know, maybe I just never asked Louis this, if they do have an evaluation type system, maybe I feel like I've seen, uh, certain individuals
Yeah.
maybe at the state wrestling
Yeah, they
when they're at the tournament to
right.
figure
They're
out who is
evaluated
gonna get
at
the
state. Yep,
finals,
yep. They
but I
have
haven't seen how to get there, I
yeah,
guess.
no, they have a process while they're at the state tournament because that was something that they allowed me to be a part of and to watch and to talk to those people. So they're watched, they're observed, they're they get that information, and then a lot of that is used for the next year and kind of going into it. But um, just again for me because of my uh, inability to process it any other way, I was like, they got to earn it. They got, you know what I mean? Like I
Yeah,
didn't want any. I was really
politics.
protective. I was really protective. I think of our athletes of and just maybe of just of how we were doing things. I was really adamant and I was really protective. I remember being on a Zoom meeting and I am sure I know that I ruffled feathers, but I was just like, by the way, and it was with a bunch of officials, and I was like, by the way, like if you're gonna if this is gonna be something that's just funny to you, get off the Zoom. Like, take your name out. I don't like if I know that you're making cracks about our season, or you're not in this, or you think that this is super JV, and if you're above this, don't do it. Just do me a favor and
Yeah.
don't do it, because on the back end of like I will go and I will find 5 other people myself to fill your spot. You know what I mean? Like I'm not. I
Don't
just
waste your
wasn't.
time.
Yeah, I'm
Yep.
not. We're just not going to waste time, and I wasn't going to just subject our girls to anything like that where they were going to feel lesser. Of like we're creating a grand stage, and if they can't put themselves there mentally, then I don't want them there physically. I guess is kind of what I was doing there. So we were pretty bold about that on the front end. So I think the people, I think everybody who was there just really felt like they had earned their right to
Yeah.
be there, which I think felt good to the officials in the room of like, yeah, we all deserve to be here, and there wasn't any of the dramatics, you know what I mean, that you might see at other things where
Well,
you're
yeah,
like, well, they
there's
don't deserve to be here, or they got here because they know who. It's like,
absolutely.
no, they earned their way here.
Yeah. No, I love that because there's no gray area of politics or how long someone's
Yeah,
been doing something, and there's definitely politics in the sport. So you're never going to get away from some of that, but I mean, sounds like you've got some things in place, which is awesome.
yeah,
And it's not easy telling an official where you have a shortage that,
yeah,
this is the way it is, and hey,
right.
you're out, so that's not easy when you're trying to do what you guys are doing. So
Yeah, we did a lot of dice rolling.
let's move on to you mentioned the super regionals of the craziness of that.
Yeah.
What is new this year? Was there anything that someone's like, yeah, I don't that just didn't we can't do that again this year?
Yeah, so I think some of the feedback that we got from last year, I guess what's new this year is we have a new location. So we're still at the 4 super regionals. So we're copy and pasting a lot of that from last year to this year, but we're going to be in Sioux Center again at Tyson Arena, or Sioux City at Tyson Arena. We're going to be in Des Moines at Iowa Event Center, Cedar Rapids at Alliant Energy, and then that Luther site we are moving to Mason City. Just the ease of getting there. They've got an amazing field house that is attached to their school. So using a combination of the field house and the school, they're super excited to put it on because, eventually we're going to give it back to schools, right? So they have a really big facility so that they can house this super regional concept, but give us kind of an inside look of what it might take for some schools and their support from their community, their boosters, everybody to put something like this on. So yeah, they stepped up, but they threw their name in the hat, and that's so that is something that will be different this year. Same concept though. Yeah, so but as far as the amount of qualifiers we're taking from, we're still running the 2 tournaments, the 2 regionals within one site. So we've got the 8 regions. So we're still just going to be taking the top 4 from each of the regions. And so we're getting to our 32 qualifiers at state. That type of stuff is all the same as far as the makeup of that. Something that was probably a little bit confusing, but they do a lot of that on the boys' side. It was just harder because we didn't have all the data points like they do on the boys' side as far as our postseason seeding criteria,
Yeah.
things like that. So, we allowed a lot of stuff last year during regular season with our scrambles and things like that, to get a lot of mat time and to kind of see where we were on things. This year, what's different is like we're really cleaning a lot of those things up. We're really legitimizing a lot of that so that we're getting what's actual varsity wrestling as opposed to what's more JV type wrestling. Because what we found is when we were getting into postseason and people are, throwing their records out there and they're going head to head and things like that, they wanted a lot of emphasis on on your win-loss record and whatnot. And it's like, well, you won those, but you were like in a scramble, or you were, you know what I mean, in this round robin and over here that protected you from actually your great competition over here. So it was all in good intent in how they set things up. But a lot of the JV type kids or the beginners were considered varsity because of the manner of the tournament, but they weren't wrestling the best competition there.
Got it.
So then that skewed your varsity records going into postseason, which didn't end up having a very big impact on how things were seated or how, who got through to state. That It didn't necessarily have an impact, but it muddied the water enough that the coaches kind of were like, wait a second, this kind of looks funky. At the end of the day, they wrestled out. It was, I would say the majority of people got where they needed to be, but it made the process a little harder to understand. So that's something we're just going to continue to clean up and work with coaches on, so they understand those things on the front end. Some of the coaches wanted like an old fashioned seating meeting. I'm like, oh no, like we're not, we can't, we're too evolved for that now. And like,
that'd be tough.
Yeah, no, that
especially see the regionals.
Correct. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. That's like, I was like, guys, come on. We're not, we're not, it's just, again, good intent, but that wasn't for what we were working with. That was not even a possibility.
I feel like tournaments are going away from the whole seeding thing because track wrestling,
it just does
they do that a lot for you.
People trust it.
I always just enjoyed the seeding meetings because you always had that one coach that's like, no, my guy should be ranked number 1, or he's like, I should be 4 seed. And you're like, kid's 50-50. He's got a 500. Like, anyway, sorry, I don't want to throw anybody.
As an AD, I always like to sit in on those because I'm like, and then I could call him out. I'm like, you're full. That's not, come on, guys. Who's gonna call him out on that? Right.
And you kind of bring up the process of from the boys' side of how sectionals, how districts are, how they put all these teams in certain places, and there's never a perfect formula. And it's probably even harder on your end of things. And I know that you used our rankings a little bit to help you do that.
Yeah.
So, I was curious if like, I think when you told me something last year of like, hey, we use your rankings to kind of piece some things together. Obviously rankings are never perfect,
right.
but like, what did those, gosh dang it. I should have had that stat, but like, it was like
96%.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I know.
96% of the girls ranked from our rankings made it to state.
Yeah, like your top 15 ranked. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was really cool to see, and that helps, I guess, the process of, and people I think to realize that like, there is a process of why certain teams are going to certain regionals. I mean, do you want every team to only have to be able to drive an hour? Obviously, that would be great, but it's not realistic too.
And we're just in such a different phase of our sport right now where we don't really even have teams. We have programs.
True.
We have, so just to give some insight on like the depth and the breadth that we had to go through to get to where we were was, I sent surveys out to coaches like the end of November, beginning of December. How many girls are on your roster? Like, how many girls are you realistically going to put into super regionals, and what weight classes do you anticipate filling? Right. So I like over 90% of our coaches got back to me on that, which was awesome. So I could then look at, okay, like East Buck has got this, and we've got this, and we've got this. And so it's number one, filling your regionals so that you've got equitable brackets just in terms of your numbers, but then spreading out your powers, right? So that your regions aren't overloaded.
Yeah.
So going through, you literally in our office, we take a massive map of the state of Iowa with all the schools on it. We put pins on it. You put rubber bands around it. You're looking location wise, geography wise, but then you're also like, knowing that you can't overload things. That's where also having the 2 regionals within one site really helped, because then after I mean, I made a million changes, right? It was
Can only
all
imagine.
last December, beginning of January, of like, this person's going to go here, this person, and this is all in anticipated weight classes, knowing that somebody's going to jump, somebody's going to shift, somebody's, you know what I mean? They're not all where they say they're going to
Yeah,
be, right?
true.
So just in the best effort, sitting down and really mapping it out, taking it to my boss, who then, combs through it, rakes it over the coals, all that kind of stuff, which is the best thing ever for that to happen. And I have to explain the process. I have to defend the process, and then it gets picked through by people in our office. And then, okay, then what you end up with is like, all right, this is the best possible version of what we can put out with the
Yeah,
information we have.
it's got to be
Yeah.
I mean, I always when Louis, I went to go see Louis at the boys association up in Boone, and he pulled back like this this map, and it had
Yeah.
like all these things,
It's the war room.
and I never
Yeah.
knew kind of how he did it. I always felt
Yeah.
like, oh, this is kind of how it is, and it's always gonna be like this. That's what I think a lot of people assume. I mean, from what I know is there's certain schools that can actually house sectionals and districts,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because
Yeah.
a lot of schools in Iowa are small, but it just the ADH brain is like, it would be nonstop. My mind would be like, wow, gosh, I don't want to like hurt this school
Mm-hmm.
because they have to go
Yeah.
here, but that's just where they should be. So like, I mean, I don't know. It would be insane to me, I guess,
I
to even
I think then
contemplate doing it.
when I was talking to some of the coaches about that, because they'd ask that same stuff of like, why are we? And I said, so I was really adamant about letting the coaches and the ADs know on the front end, and they kind of understand this about our organization too. It's like, if we're sending you somewhere, like if you're going farther than where you think you should be going, it's because you have a better chance of qualifying by going farther,
Yeah.
right? Like you might, it might be 20 miles away, or it might be 120 miles away. If I'm sending you 120 miles away, it's because I've looked through it, and your heavyweight has an opportunity here that she wouldn't have over here. You know what I mean? Like that type of stuff. And so I think once they understood that, we got very little pushback on, what was going on there. Like, from region to region, like, it was, Jean, again, our boss, said like, okay, you have to understand that there's going to be a mom that calls you, and you're going to have to explain to her why her daughter didn't have, what was potentially set up to fail in one region or another. So those are the things that you have to think about, is like, are people potentially set up to fail in these regions compared to other regions? And so at the end of the day, I was like, I think it's pretty cut and
Yeah,
dry.
you felt like you did your due diligence in
Yeah.
making
So
that.
I'm
I think
starting that process earlier this year.
I think that's good for the people watching to realize that it's not just for you and the boys association. It's not just picking regions and putting them in these super regionals. It's actually a thought out process. So
Yeah.
so the only real change is same amount of qualifiers. We're just moving from Luther to Mason. So expect all the same there. The next thing that has been talked about a lot of, man, there's a lot of girls state wrestling tournament. Fans are just packed. Is when the heck are we going to go to 2 classes, right?
Yeah.
Or 3 classes or whatever it may be. The boys side, they're talking about getting rid of one of the classes. So, not rushing into doing something like that is something that I would assume the Girls Association is doing.
Yeah.
Not rushing into it, because
Yeah.
it would be easy just to go 2 classes. Maybe not easy, but that has to be a conversation. So how far away do you think we are from the 1A, 2A, or 3A, 2A, whatever the heck you're going to call it, I guess?
Yeah. So I think if we have our steady continual growth this year, we're not going to have growth like last year. We're just not, right? And that's fine. That's good, right? We're going to be able to backbuild a little bit, and that's kind of the term I've been using when people say, "Well, why didn't you just go to 2 classes? You had all the numbers." And it's like, yeah, we had almost 2,400 participating through the season. A lot of those girls, they weren't necessarily ready to wrestle at the super regional event, right? Their coaches were kind of recognized where they were, or maybe they're just in kind of these logjam weight classes where they're stuck behind other people. So when we're looking at what mattered to us last year was the number that was competing at super regionals, right? So I think we were somewhere around 1,400 total, right? Which was a good number, right? It's a great number. But then when we're taking 448 to state, you know what I mean? You're looking at the ratio and like that seems right. That seems good, you know. So we need to build on that then before we expand into 2 classes, because then when you do that, you also you disrupt the co-op sharing agreements, right?
Yeah.
We had over 50 programs that were co-op sharing this year, where they were taking on 1 or 2 kids here, or they're taking on 4 different communities, and giving them what they have been expressing is they wanted some time to settle in. You know, we threw a million changes at schools really, really fast, and so they had to shift and adapt and whatnot. So we really thought, our board thought, that just having a year to settle in, right? And just, okay, where are we really, right? It was so easy to continue to like ride the perceived wave of momentum, right? But really, it's our job to actually step back and take a look and say, okay, you will have collapse. We have seen other places collapse when it grows too fast and you don't have the infrastructure to support it, right? You don't have the officials, you don't have the coaches, you don't have all of this stuff to support it, then it doesn't really do us any good. So that was our big challenge for this year, is legitimizing all of that, right? And kind of trying to explain to people of like, yeah, that we do have a lot participating, but what does that participation look like? And then what does it potentially look like when you separate that so soon right now? Um, it just, yeah, it felt pretty messy and pretty premature. So I think if we have another year where we're steady and we continue to grow, and people, those numbers on those rosters start to fill in, then I would say next year, the year after, would be a natural space for us to break away.
Is there another sport that has 2 classes that has like a co-op? Say, just come close to it, Raccoon, where they have like Walking Northwest and they've got Van Meter,
Yeah, I
right?
mean,
Like a
like
four.
tennis has 2 classes, right? So that, again, like moving into being an administrator for tennis, right? Looking at the number of schools and what we've got there, and how they do it, you know, because they talk about potentially wanting to go to 3 classes, and you see where that could be a detriment then to the 1A class, right? Like your 2A and 3A schools might do just fine, right? And they maybe need to be broken up, but where smaller communities, right?
Mhm.
So you have to make sure when you're looking at it, of top to bottom, what does that really look like? Because if we have, you know, a bunch of 1A schools, a bunch of 1A programs, of, you know, the boys run into it almost on you know, on their side of like, they have, you know, it's like we've done away with sectionals because it's
Mhm.
hard to fill these rosters
Yeah.
in 1A programs. You know what I mean? And so we're really careful to make sure we're not like running into that same problem intentionally, right? Where we're letting those 1A, those lower number schools really start to build and get established where they are. Because what we don't also want is when we say, okay, we're going to 2 classes, those schools who are so bound in cooperative sharing, right? Those smaller schools who are so bound in cooperative sharing, if they're taking on each other's enrollments, then that's kicking them up to a 2A
Yeah.
situation. So to kind of summarize that too, is within our organization, we're working on some things that schools can petition to stay in a lower class, and some things like that, that will really help some of our rural schools. So we wanted to have some of those things in place too before we made some of these moves.
Yeah, because I could, when you said collapse, and my first thought would go to is, say, Van Meter. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many girls they have, but I mean, that co-op's got like 5 schools in
Right.
it, right? So if you go, hey, we're gonna put this co-op in 2A, and if I'm Van Meter, um, I say, I really don't want to be in 2A. Like,
Yeah.
do I say, we're bound, we're out of this?
Yeah.
Now we want
Yeah.
to go to 1A.
Right.
What kind of selfishness kind of comes into those plays as far as really hurting ultimately that team. I could see, schools. There's always this, like, it's not fair that they get this, we don't have that. You have that in, every
Right.
school has certain amenities, and some
Yeah.
don't. That's why you have 5A, 4A, and 3A schools. They have
Yeah.
certain amenities. Obviously, school numbers is what it's based off of, but reality is, you know, resources, in my
Right.
in my opinion,
Yeah.
right? A 1A school doesn't have 5A resources usually, typically. So
Right.
I could just see how you'd want to either push a school out to go lower or get away from that because you don't want to go to the higher class.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
think it'd be kind of a drama fest, honestly. But reality is that's going to come at some point in
Yeah.
time. So
No, but I think, what will be nice to be able to do is get through this season, right? Take the teams that participated this season as they were, right? And then say, okay, if we did classification based on the teams and the numbers that participated this last year, then this is what it would look like going into next year, right? And then having a really great snapshot. And I did that a little bit already, but having a really great snapshot of, okay, what do our 1A teams look like? I'm not worried about the 2A teams, right? What do our 1A teams look like?
Mhm.
Can they fill those rosters? Do they have some of those legitimate programs built yet? And if the answer is yes, then okay, there we go. You know what I mean? It's like it's there we go. But yeah. I mean, you
Okay.
always have people who
Yeah.
try. I don't want to say like
Game the
play.
system. Yeah.
Yeah,
Game
yeah.
the system for sure.
And that's part of it, right? I
If
respect
you
that on
can, you will.
I respect that
That's
on some level, right? But
absolutely.
but what I want to make sure that we're doing is giving schools and programs enough time to make those adjustments,
Mhm.
right? So for me to say, oh, we're going to 2 classes right now, like that's ridiculous, right? So being able to take another year of data, feeling really good about our decision, and then making a move if this next year is the
Okay.
year to do that.
All right. So then the next thing that I've got here that I wanted to get to is my favorite part of the sport is duels,
Yeah.
and there's obviously reasons why you can and cannot do that.
Mhm.
Is there anything stopping teams from setting their own schedules from your guys' end?
Yeah, no, I mean, if a team, if there was a program that said we're only wrestling in dual events this year, I'd be like, great, let me know when they are. I want to come watch.
Okay.
No, so schools have total freedom to set up their schedules, their regular season schedules, however they want to. It's interesting because my advisory committee was they're great people, and I have tasked them with so much and asked them to have their foot down hard on the gas at 100 miles an hour. And so at our last advisory meeting, I was like, guys, I just need like 60 miles an hour right now. Like, let's let up just a little bit, right? Because their brain is go, right? And that's why
Yeah.
they're on there, right?
Yeah.
But they want to do so much with the sport and they want to do it really quickly, which again, I applaud. And that's why I want them there, because I want them thinking about these things and helping me with that process. But when we really sat and looked at, okay, well, when are we going to do it? Right. Ooh, crickets. Right. And then
Yeah.
how do those teams qualify? Ooh, crickets. You know what I mean? So I tasked them with a lot of things of like research, rankings, getting a lot of things in place of like, we again have to have systems and process in place, because what I can't do is roll out a tournament and have, X amount of teams qualify and not be able to have a sound process of how they qualified. Like, who gets left out?
Yeah.
Why? You know what I mean? What data do we have to back our decision making?
Yeah.
And it just didn't feel like it was enough to make that. So they're tasked with a lot this year, still. But that's another thing that'll be kind of next on the plate.
Is there a push from coaches to say we want a dual state championship?
Well, I think that I think that what they found and what a lot of the girls have found is that, they love dual meet competition. I think what we've seen is the girls are really, really drawn to being great teammates, that dual, you know what I mean? Just
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
dual feel maybe takes a little bit of pressure off of them in individual competitions, which I think that they've liked this year. But yeah, it's again, who are we leaving out? And when we have put such an emphasis on rolling things out as an individual sport, I think when you put a lot of emphasis, you turn around and you switch the narrative and you put a lot of emphasis on dual team participation. Those schools that aren't there yet, as far as, Earlham, right? And not having that dual team, and then the feeling of, how do we grow? How we're left out now. Our competitions aren't as fun. Nobody's paying attention to us. And it's like, that's not the narrative that we want to write. We want to let teams grow into that as they can and set that up as, again, the teams that are ready for that. There's no restrictions on what they can or can't do. But again, back building and getting teams ready for that. But yeah, I'll be at Battle of Waterloo, right? I'll be at a lot of different places watching how some of those things are done, because I went last year. It was great to
That
watch.
was.
And no, they'll be ready for it before I am.
Yeah, they've got the Battle Waterloo is going to look a little bit different this year. They're going to 2 days, I
Yeah.
believe. More teams. That was fun. I mean, that atmosphere for those girls is different than the boys. I mean, wrestling in general, I think, is different for boys and girls. From a coach's standpoint too, I think it's just a different atmosphere. Um, you know, with these changes that are coming and they're already here, I guess. I've been getting some feedback of that girls wrestling actually is hurting boys wrestling. Is that just something that I'm getting that feedback? Are you guys feeling that at all from any administrators or coaches?
I'm not sure that anybody's really framed it like that to me. Maybe they're not bold enough to say that to me because I think I have a million counter
Yeah.
arguments, right? Um, so I think what is hard is that there are some schools who are in tricky spots, right, with how they are trying to roll things out. I think that there are coaches who, I mean, I've had the conversations with the coach or their AD of like, what am I going to do with my boys program? And I'm like, you should probably just embrace it. You should probably just embrace it. And the schools who are having the most success for boys and girls are programs that are supporting each other and that are working together and they're figuring it out together, right? It's like when you see basketball teams, right? Especially those schools that have to share gyms and the programs that support each other and work with each other, the coaches that work with each other tend to have a lot of success. Mm-hmm. And so it was just like, I mean, everybody's got to choose their hard, right? This is a hard scenario for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But like, is it a burden or is it an opportunity, right? I think
Yes.
I even talked about that the last time I was here.
Absolutely.
It was just like, what is it, right? Does it pick your hard? But I'd rather have a harder opportunity than this burden.
Yeah.
And so, no, I'm pretty quick to shoot back a lot of stats to people who want to say those things. Yeah, it's something that I was aware of. Our girls' basketball numbers are declining across the country, and I think now we've got some great ambassadors for the sport. On the collegiate level, which is really amazing. Yeah. And so hopefully some of those things will grow. But I walk into a basketball advisory meeting, that our coaches having, and somebody's like, oh, the Grim Reaper, and of girls basketball. And I was like, hey, like, we're here to create opportunities. We're giving opportunities. And they're joking, but it's like, it's like when somebody's like, oh, it's going to kill basketball. It's like, no, basketball is going to kill basketball. Like, you know what I mean? It's not so.
Same was said about cheerleading too. Of like, okay, well, the girls that don't play basketball, they do cheerleading. Well, that's not really fair. If a girl wants to if they want to play basketball, they'll play basketball. If they want to wrestle.
Yeah. They have options.
I don't want to fall into that.
Or they were like, "Oh, you're taking my manager." Yeah. Good. Maybe your manager always wanted to wrestle.
I do. I do feel like it's, and I'm not just saying this because you're here. I do feel like it. I feel that when a coach tells me that, like, I hear that, and then when you kind of frame it in the mind of exactly what you just said, is turn it from a burden to an opportunity, right? If you're a school that is fighting for travel, more pay, more coaches, more pay, new singlets, whatever things. Charlie Bailey said, "Hey, what if 25 more boys went out for your varsity team and you only got 30 singlets? You're gonna go buy 25 more singlets, right? You're gonna figure it out, right?" Yep. And wrestling for some reason is in that spot where most of the facilities, some of these schools have 2 gyms, right? There's only 1 wrestling room in most places, right? There's very few that have two wrestling rooms. Most of the wrestling rooms are small, right? So, communities that do want, girls wrestling, they want that to grow, or in general, I want their boys program to grow, almost have to take a seat back and embrace girls wrestling. And I wouldn't say like use it, but you are, right? Like you are, right?
Use it for the good. Use it for the good.
It's an opportunity, opportunity to say, all right, girls, like, we're going to use you to help our program, which in turn is going to help your program. So like
use each other for the good.
Exactly. Right.
And that's where, when ADs, when coaches have reached out and they've kind of made the comments of like, what am I supposed to do? It's like, ask your basketball coaches. They've been figuring it out forever. Like you guys, wrestlers, they've been in a spot where they've been able to be selfish, Nobody like knew what was happening behind these doors. Like people just walk, people can walk through the gym and look at the practice and, see what's going on and have a lot of feedback. Like wrestling was just like little, secret society happening in like the corner of a school somewhere,
We don't like
the
walls.
basement.
We don't like
I mean?
windows in our,
Yeah,
in our, in our
exactly.
wrestling.
Right. Like, so nobody really knew what was going on anyway. So there's a lot of administrators who then had to turn around and ask questions about, just all of it, right? Top to bottom, which is good. Like, it's just good. But, and that's what I told, was just talking the other day with a coach who's like, I don't know what I'm going to do. My wrestling room's too small. I said, grow your girls program so that you can have a bigger facility for everybody. Like, grow it. And that's, I've had probably 20 different schools already reach out to me now of their like, and we're getting a new wrestling facility because we added girls wrestling and everybody's going to benefit from it. I understand that that's like, everybody's like, oh, that's just big money talking. It's like, these are rural schools. These are rural schools who are seeing the benefits of a lot of this stuff too. So now anybody I think that wants to come up to me, I'm always willing to listen to anybody and try to help them frame their issue, frame their problems. But anybody who would walk up to me and would say that to me, I'd be like, I already know more about you than you know about me, right? Like I already know.
Have you watched Suits before?
That's
Are you
really,
Donna?
That's
Are you
really,
the Donna of wrestling?
That's really funny. There's a couple of people. It's I think I was the Beth Dutton of wrestling last year, so I don't know. I'll have to check out Donna. I'm not sure. But
You should dress up like Beth from Yellowstone for Halloween in 2 weeks.
I don't know if I could hit. I don't know.
just get a bottle of whiskey.
That might be a whole other thing, right? No, I think people, maybe that narrative is floating around in some sense, but I think it takes a really bold person to have the actual data to back some of that stuff. It's the same stuff that we get when, and they're like, this, not letting girls wrestle with boys is killing this or that. And it's just like, come on, guys. Like, it's just like, that to me is just a frustrating argument because really it's like, what's in the best interest of the girls, right? What's in the best interest? And I think sometimes the best interest of the boys too. It's like, so I've got a few of my Q statements then that I shoot back at people to challenge them to think about like what their lens really is. So it's kind of taking, right now we're kind of battling that on the junior high level. And again, I just have to tell people, it's like everybody's having to make hard decisions. Everybody is having to overcome things. Everybody's got their own stuff in their own places. That again, a lot of people are finding opportunities in it.
Yeah, I mean, there hasn't been a lot. Sorry if you have to go, but
no, I don't.
Okay. There is a lot of, when we talk anyways, or in general of girls wrestling, there is a lot of talk about the high school events and stuff like that. But down the road, now, because I think at the time, hey, we got to go after those high school wrestlers to get them out for wrestling so we can have a team. Yeah. Well, now we got to start thinking about how we build the programs to great programs, and that's junior high, right?
Yeah.
And on the boys' side, we struggle with basketball. Boys don't know what they want yet. Maybe it's split season stuff. Of hey, maybe I should try basketball, and that goes straight down to like 4th, 5th grade, whatever, right? So, what do you guys what kind of hands do you have on those junior high programs? Is that like the next thing to create not policies but like structure?
This kind of point of emphasis, I think, is kind of what I've called it this year. Of there's people who naturally have a lot more questions about it. There's not a lot of people who have questions about junior high basketball. It's been around forever.
Yeah,
you have a team or you don't. You know what I mean? It's
true.
It's one of those things. So them trying to figure out how to structure junior high wrestling is just different. Because then they also are trying to figure out where to put some of their girl seasons, which we don't govern. People are like, well, when's the start of girl season? We don't govern. I mean, like if somebody wanted to start, I don't advise this, but if somebody wanted to start a girls junior high season in September and finish it in March, they could do that. It's all local decision. What we say is you can only have 9 competition dates, or, what I mean, for any of our junior high sports, you can only have X amount of competition dates. And so there's no stop or start. So when we say you can or can't, we don't say if you can or can't have split season. I mean, there's so many things that people have said, hey, can you just regulate that for us? And I said, well, that might work really, really well for your district. But if that, there's going to be at least half the population that's not going to work for them, which is why we give them the freedom there. But I do think in just terms of trying to clean it up, trying to help, provide some of that supporting data that says, when you allow girls to wrestle girls, your numbers grow. Your numbers grow. When you put a coach in charge of these girls, numbers grow. So if you are committed to having a legitimate girls program, even if that's a feeder program, which junior high is, then these are the steps that you need to take in order to do that. So again, it becomes very apparent of the schools or the programs that are like, yeah, we're not really thinking about all of that right now, which I get all of it, but they might not be thinking a whole lot about their junior high boys program either, So it's junior high is just a whole other beast in itself. But we're trying to, but it's like I can't step in and over govern junior high because it's not what we do for our other junior high sports.
Got it.
So there's a looseness there that maybe has a little frustration, but I've been trying to, like, the intent of these things should be this. The emphasis of these things should be this, so that your goal is to grow a foundation that supports this, right?
One thing that I've been noticing with junior high programs on the boys' side, primarily because I just haven't dealt with girls wrestling in junior high a whole lot, because I just don't think there's really a whole lot of numbers there. I'd be curious how many schools actually have a junior high schedule for girls wrestling. I'm guessing most of them are just practicing with the boys. I would assume, just for mat space scheduling. But I just been I feel like more kids, more coaches are pushing away from junior high. They're going towards club wrestling. Do you think that is the right move, wrong move?
We obviously being, my job is school-based athletics, right? So you're never going to see me promoting club, but I do think clubs can be used for good, right? I think it's, your junior high seasons are so short for the most part, right? They're short, and it's a lot of management. You don't really control who goes out or not. There's eligibility. There's a lot of things, right? What schools do in trying to provide that structure and that setup, the framework of junior high participation is great, right? So to get kids interested in going out and to make them fall in love with it, right? Those things are really necessary, right? But for kids who want more, right? They want more, then that's where your club stuff is necessary. I think that they could take a lot of notes from basketball, right? Because I think, again, this is, I don't have a lot of data to support this, right? Because we don't track all the way down that far. But when did we really see a lot of numbers declining in basketball is when, we used to try basketball for the first time 6th, 7th, 8th grade, right? Growing up. I mean, we have our playground basketball, right? But we didn't have organized competition really a whole lot before then. Now it's like 1st grade, 2nd grade, you know what I mean? So everybody has already figured out who the best of the best is in their opinion by 6th grade. So people aren't going to go out for it because they've had all of these other club type experiences, or they've, pay to play stuff, right? And so they get to junior high and they're like, man, it's not really worth it for me because I'm not good, right? And so then you're working with so many fewer athletes who are nowhere close to their prime. And so I think that you have to watch and see where that has been hurting a lot of other sports, because we also know that you have about like 6 years of really intense competitive, the average person has about 6 years of intense competition that they can handle before they're really burned out, right? So if your 6 years starts in 2nd grade, what does that look like by the time you get into junior high or high school? A lot of people don't want to move on. You're just doing it to doing it. You're going through the motions. You get increase in injury, all that kind of stuff. You really start to get competitive in that junior high realm, and that's where it's set up to like have great competition. Like you're still hungry for it as you're going through, and especially a sport like wrestling that's so demanding. So I think a lot of that basic skill work, a lot of the basic stuff that you're finding in those, and your lower level stuff, it's fun. Keeping that stuff fun for kids, where you get into ingraining a ton of competition and those kids feeling that individual pressure a lot. That's where I get worried for the sport as it goes, right? So I wonder also the correlation of some of that number of the drop off, or the frustration, the burnout, that kind of stuff that's happening right now in some of the boys' high school, not just in the state of Iowa, but everywhere, is because it's like, okay, when did these kids start? Right.
Yeah.
Then you look at 10 years before that and it wasn't that, right?
True.
So I don't know. That's the data that I'm always interested in tracking.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't know. I think it's an individual experience that I hope that parents can see big picture of, right? Like I've got a daughter, right? We started her early in a few things, but I think keeping that
community.
Yeah.
Community is important.
Community is important, and being intentional about what the purpose of all of it is with your kids is really important.
Yeah. That's where I see the sides of not doing junior high, just specific wrestling, because you're just ingrained in like being in that club.
Yeah.
And those are your club teammates, but in reality, your teammates are going to change when you get to high school. So that's who you're going to tournaments with, the duels. So
yeah. Well, Taylor from our office, he put it best the other day when he's just like, who's celebrating the 20th year of your club championship?
Yeah.
Nobody.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like nobody's recognizing them at a big state event.
True.
It's just so I think keeping that in perspective. Obviously, some kids have some really special goals, right? But I think you can still have those and participate in school-based athletics and find a lot from that. So.
Perfect. Well, we got to everything that was on my list that I wanted to get to. Sounds like we're tearing down buildings. They took down the kaleidoscope that had the shake place in there. Did you notice that yet? Remember, like during the state wrestling tournament, you could get the shake poured on your head. Like that's right next to my office.
Yeah.
And they're just today apparently is the day they're going to do more. So I'm going to change it. I'll stop the show just because I know that that's going to continue to go here.
Sure.
But the IWCOA meeting, IWCOA convention's coming up. Assuming you're going to be at that, talking to coaches and stuff like that. But if there's something in the show that kind of triggered somebody to be like, man, we're going about this wrong, or I need some more resources. Could be a simple thing is we have trouble getting singlets, we have trouble getting coach, or hey, we need a new wrestling room like Earlham. How can they reach? What's the best way to reach out to you?
Tell Chris Caskey at Earlham, who's my friend, to give me a call, right?
Perfect.
But really, it is. If it's not me as a resource, we have, again, a lot of resources within the IWCOA advisory committees, people who are doing it that, I love to point people to because, I mean, it's, again, is it a burden or an opportunity?
Burden or opportunity. I like that.
Yeah.
That's the title of this show.
We got a lot of opportunity.
I love it. Yeah. All right. For Erin, Tony here. Thanks everybody for tuning in to another episode of Potentially Dangerous. We're back. Feels good. I feel bad saying that I'm back. Like I should just be doing this all summer. But for you of those that don't know, I live in Earlham now, and I have a farm and ponies and goats, and the pony got out yesterday. But I'm back. Wrestling season's here. Super excited about all the opportunities that we have for our wrestling, for iWrestle, and just to promote the sport. This year is going to be we've got a lot of new people, new faces on iWrestle that you're gonna love to see our content on Instagram and YouTube and all that good stuff. So make sure you give us a follow, and we look forward to another great state wrestling tournament. Thanks.
Is this also where I say? This is not a White Claw, because I actually just got a note for like a buzz, right? This is a Celsius.
It's a Celsius
for the record,
and this is a water. Okay.
Yes.
Thanks for watching.